She always came barefoot, never explained why, just curled into my space like it was hers. I told myself her foot touching my lips was an accident, but I didn't move. Because some moments aren't mistakes, they're turning points. Welcome to Goddess Foot Confessions. Let's uncover what really happened. The house always felt different after noon. Quieter somehow, like the walls had finally exhaled. I used to dread that silence. Now I clung to it. It meant I could hear everything clearly. The slow tick of the clock above the mantel, the soft creak of the floor when someone walked across it, the way the sunlight pooled across the wooden boards like melted gold. I wasn't expecting much anymore. Life had thinned itself out. The energy I once carried had dried up somewhere between disappointments and routines. That's why her visits, simple as they were, felt like someone opening a window in a room I didn't know had grown stale. She started coming over a few months ago. I don't know if it was out of boredom, convenience, or something else. At first, it was just to borrow things, a charger, a mixing bowl, help lifting something too heavy. Then she stayed longer. Coffee turned into conversation. Conversation turned into silence. The good kind. It was always in the afternoons. She never said why. She never stayed long. But she always came barefoot. Always. At first I didn't think much of it. She'd walk in like it was her place. Not rudely, just comfortably. Kick her flip-flops off by the door without looking, leaving them scattered in ways that somehow never felt careless. Her feet made little sounds as she moved through the house. Soft thuds, barely their taps. I noticed them before I admitted I was listening for them. Those afternoons began to stretch, not in time but in weight. A kind of pressure hung in the air, delicate but present. I didn't know what to call it. Not tension, not attraction, not exactly. Just awareness. A growing awareness of how close we were, of how little space she took up, yet how completely she filled a room. And always barefoot. Those were the afternoons that changed everything. She never made a show of it. That was what made it worse. Or better. I'm still not sure. She'd step inside without knocking. Just a gentle push of the door, the wood creaking softly as it swung open. Her flip-flops would land somewhere by the rug, forgotten, and the first thing I'd notice every time was the way her toes curled slightly when they touched the cool floor. Like she was grounding herself. Like she belonged here. The more I noticed, the harder it was to look away. The pink polish she always wore, never chipped, never dull. The delicate arch of her foot, the quiet confidence in every step. She didn't move like someone who was trying to catch attention. She moved like someone who already had it and knew it. She'd walk past me toward the kitchen, humming sometimes, or twirling a strand of hair between her fingers. Her feet made soft sounds on the wood, bare heels whispering across the surface. Sometimes I catch myself pretending to be focused on something else, just so I wouldn't be caught staring. But I always stared. It wasn't just the way she looked, though God, that would have been enough. It was the ease of it, the way she seemed untouched by the awkwardness that hung around me like fog. She was warm, unbothered, present. There was something intimate about her bare feet on my floor, like she'd peeled something off with those sandals at the door. Not just rubber and leather, but pretense. And I don't think she was unaware of me noticing. One time, she stood near the window while sipping her tea, one foot resting on the edge of the couch cushion, toes flexing absently. I said nothing. I couldn't. She looked back at me then, over her shoulder with the softest smile. Like she knew, and didn't mind. It was a Wednesday, just after 3. I remember because the light hit the hallway in that way. It only does when the sun cuts sideways through the blinds. Long shadows, warm streaks across the floor, like the house itself had exhaled into quiet. I hadn't planned on seeing her that day. I hadn't planned on anything, really. My days had become that way, loose, soft-edged, half-lived. So when the door eased open and she stepped in like she always did, my heart gave that strange little stutter. Familiar, but unexpected. She carried nothing. No excuse this time. Just her. Hair up in a loose twist, cheeks a little flushed from the sun. A cropped sweatshirt hung off one shoulder, and her leggings clung to her like they were meant to. But my eyes didn't stay there long. She was barefoot, as always. There was something about that detail that made everything feel more real. Like she hadn't come to visit. She had come home. "Hey," she said softly, her voice more of a mood than a greeting. Hey, I replied, and it sounded more breath than word. She walked past me toward the living room without waiting, dropping her phone on the side table like she had every right to. She didn't ask. She never asked. I followed, watching the way her soles barely lifted off the floor as she moved. She curled her legs under her on the couch, one foot poking out from beneath her. The light from the window caught the shine of her nail polish. Coral today, maybe. Something soft. She leaned her head back on the cushion and let out a long breath. Do you mind if I stay for a bit? I shook my head. No, of course not. She smiled, eyes still closed. Thought you'd say that. And that was it. No reason. No plan. Just her in my space, barefoot and comfortable, as if her presence didn't rearrange the air around her. As if this really was just a visit like any other. It only happened on colder days, when the wind scraped the windows and the chill clung to the baseboards. That's when she wore socks, thick ones, usually patterned, pulled high over her ankles like they had something to prove. And every time, she took them off the same way. She'd curl into the far end of the couch, legs tucked beneath her like a cat. Then, slowly, almost absent-mindedly, she'd peel them down, one at a time. First the right, then the left. She never rushed. The cuff would roll over her ankle, revealing bare skin inch by inch. The fabric would catch a little at her heel, then glide off her sole, soft and practiced. I never heard the sound it made, but I always imagined it, like the soft rustle of cotton giving up its hold. She never looked at me while she did it. Maybe that was what made it feel so intimate. The way it wasn't performed. Like I wasn't supposed to be watching, but she wasn't hiding either. Today, the socks were pale gray, with little moons stitched into the sides. I watched her fingers hook beneath the top of one, tugging gently. Her heels slipped free with the smallest pop. Then her toes. Awaken. Painted again. A different color now, a dusky violet like bruised dusk. Her toes flexed, adjusting to the air, the light. The movement sent a ripple up my spine. She wiggled them slightly, maybe to stretch, maybe not. And then, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, she rested her foot lightly on the cushion between us. Not touching, but close. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. The socks lay forgotten on the armrest. Her toes shifted again, and my breath hitched. She opened her eyes slowly, catching me in the act of not looking away. Her gaze lingered, soft but sharp. Then, without a word, she smiled and leaned back again, like none of it had happened. The first drop hit the window like a whisper, then another, then a scatter, like fingertips drumming slowly across glass. I glanced outside. The sky had shifted, thick with gray, soft-edged clouds pressing low, the world beyond the glass now blurred in silvery motion. She didn't move. The rain had arrived quietly, as if not to disturb her. She sat curled on the couch, a soft throw blanket draped loosely over her legs, one bare foot still exposed at the end. Her toes twitched once beneath the chill, then stilled. She looked peaceful. I sat across from her, pretending to scroll through my phone, though I couldn't read a single word. My eyes kept drifting back, to the shape of her foot under the blanket, to the soft rise and fall of her breathing. The rain added something. It made everything feel closer, warmer, like the world had pressed pause outside, and we were the only ones not frozen in place. You always look like you're thinking about something important, she said suddenly, her voice low and calm. I looked up. Doi. She nodded, not opening her eyes. Like your mind somewhere 3 rooms away. Maybe, I murmured. Or maybe I'm just here. She opened one eye at that, then both. Her gaze was calm, unreadable. The kind of look that makes you feel like you've already said too much. The rain thickened outside. Sheets of water streaked down the glass, turning the window into a moving watercolor. Inside, the room dimmed, lights softening into gold and gray. She shifted slightly, pulling the blanket tighter, then lifted her legs and stretched them toward me, just enough that her foot brushed the edge of my knee. Cold, she whispered. I looked down. Her toes flexed once, curling lightly. Still painted violet. Still perfect. I swallowed. My hand twitched in my lap. I could have pulled away. I didn't. She didn't move her foot. The rain kept falling, and the silence between us grew thicker. I don't remember when it happened exactly. One minute her feet were stretched toward me, just brushing my knee. The next, they were resting fully in my lap, like it was nothing, like that space had always belonged to her. She didn't ask. She didn't even look at me when she did it. Just shifted, slow and unbothered, until the weight of her calves settled across my thighs. One foot rested flat, the other angled slightly, her heel pressing gently into the fabric of my jeans. Everything in my body went still. She was still talking, something about the rain, about how it reminded her of a cabin she once stayed in during college. I heard the words. I even nodded, but none of them registered, because all I could feel was the heat of her soles against me. All I could see was the curve of her foot, the faint shimmer of polish, the way her toes flexed and uncurled like a slow breath. I didn't dare move. It wasn't the kind of touch that demanded a response. It was quieter than that, more dangerous. She adjusted her position again, a soft rustle of fabric and skin, and her foot slid slightly across my leg. Not far, not purposefully, but enough. Enough to send that now familiar ripple up my spine. Enough to make my breath hitch just slightly too loud. Her voice trailed off. I looked up and found her watching me, not with surprise, not even curiosity, with awareness. She blinked once, then smiled. Barely, just enough to tell me she knew exactly where we were now. And still, she didn't move her feet. If anything, she settled deeper into the cushions, letting her toes graze the inside of my wrist as I pretended not to flinch. Outside, the rain softened into mist. Inside, I realized I wasn't in control anymore. And maybe I didn't want to be. I didn't move. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. Her feet were still in my lap, warm and delicate, the soft skin of her arch pressing faintly into my thigh. One of her toes traced a small, unconscious line across the seam of my jeans. Or maybe it wasn't unconscious. I didn't ask. I didn't speak. She had gone quiet too. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full, swollen with something neither of us wanted to name. I kept my eyes on the floor, pretending to be distracted by the muted patterns of light moving across the rug. But I could feel her watching me, studying the way my breathing changed, the way my fingers twitched against the cushion, how carefully I kept my hands to myself. She shifted slightly, her heel dragging just an inch across my leg. Lazy, slow, like she was adjusting for comfort. But that inch rewired something in me. Every nerve lit up in quiet protest. Or surrender. Still, I didn't move. I was afraid that if I did, the moment would break, like stepping too suddenly on a fragile bridge. So I stayed still, a willing prisoner beneath her feet. And yet, that stillness felt anything but passive. I was aware of everything. The way her second toe curled just slightly over her big toe, how the polish caught the soft lamplight, how her sole made a faint imprint in the denim. I heard her take a breath and hold it. The seconds stretched into something more, something intimate, not loud, not dramatic, just real. Then, quietly, almost absent-mindedly, she whispered, "You don't have to be so careful, you know." My heart stuttered, but I still didn't move, because deep down I knew she wasn't just talking about my body. She was talking about my fear, and how ready she was for me to let it go. She stretched a little, long and slow like a cat waking from a nap, her arms overhead, her toes pointing outward in my lap. The blanket slid off her knees and pulled softly at her waist, revealing the full length of her legs, smooth, toned, easy. "You ever give a good foot massage?" she asked suddenly, half teasing, half serious. I blinked. I mean, maybe. She smiled, not mocking but warm. She wiggled her toes against my leg, then tipped her head, her voice low and playful. "Want to try?" I swallowed hard. My hands hovered for a moment before I let them settle, cautiously, around her foot. It was warm, lighter than I expected. The skin was soft, tender in places, firmer in others. Her toes flexed slightly under my fingers. My palms began to move in slow circles, instinctive, careful. I didn't trust myself to breathe too loudly. She let out a quiet hum of approval, her eyes fluttering closed as she leaned back against the couch. "That's not bad," she whispered. My thumb moved along the edge of her sole, tracing the gentle rise of her arch. My other hand supported her heel, lifting slightly, just enough to adjust the angle. Her foot rested in my grasp like it had always belonged there. And in that moment, I didn't feel awkward. I felt needed. The intimacy wasn't in what I was doing. It was in how she let me. How she trusted me with her stillness, her breath, her vulnerability. Her other foot shifted slightly, brushing against my side, then resting gently on the edge of my thigh. My hands kept moving. Her foot responded, toes curling and unspooling slowly, like a flower unfolding to light. She opened her eyes, just for a second, and looked at me. A look that said she knew what this meant for me, and maybe what it meant for her too. But neither of us said a word, because some moments don't need language. They just need permission, and hers was already given. I've never been the type to notice details, not really. But with her, I noticed everything, especially her toes. It wasn't just the color, though the dusky violet polish she wore today was soft and rich, like the sky just after sunset. It was the way they moved, the way each one seemed to have its own quiet language. They flexed slightly under my thumb, reacting to the pressure of my massage. Her big toe twitched when I pressed too deep near the ball of her foot. The others followed, a ripple of motion, subtle, delicate, alive. I watched them more than I meant to. Her skin was impossibly smooth. The faintest creases marked where her toes met her sole, lines I traced absent-mindedly with the tip of one finger. Her second toe was a little longer than the first, something I'd never noticed until now. Something that made her more real, more human, more hers. I let my fingers glide over the pads of her toes, slow and careful. Each time they twitched or flexed in response, something stirred in me. Not lust exactly, something quieter, something that made me feel like I was discovering a secret no one else had been trusted with. Her heel rested comfortably against my thigh, and her other foot remained pressed lightly to my hip, anchoring her to me like a quiet claim. She shifted a little on the couch, exhaling a soft sigh, relaxed, content, maybe even grateful. The rain was still falling outside, blurring the world beyond the window into watercolor. Inside, the silence between us felt sacred. I kept massaging, slower now, not out of obligation, but out of reverence. When I finally let my hands rest, her toes flexed once more, a silent thank you, or maybe an invitation. I didn't know yet, but I knew this much. Those painted toes weren't just part of her anymore. They were part of my undoing. The massage slowed, then stopped, but I didn't let go. Her foot rested lightly in my hands, unmoving, warm, delicate. My thumbs had fallen still against her arch, my fingers gently cupping the top. And yet, neither of us moved. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was suspended, like we both sensed something forming in the stillness, something too fragile to disturb. Her other foot, the one nestled against my hip, flexed slightly. I felt it through the thin fabric of my shirt. A small shift, barely anything, but everything. My pulse moved into my throat. I wasn't sure she noticed. I wasn't sure if she hadn't meant for me to. She leaned back into the couch again, her head tipped lazily against the cushion, hair loose around her neck. Her eyes were half closed, but I could feel them watching me, or maybe feeling me. I looked down at her foot, still in my hands, still painted that muted violet. The color was starting to chip, just a little near the edge of her pinky toe. I stared at it longer than I should have. And then, slowly, she curled her toes. The motion pressed her arch more firmly into my palm, and I let out the faintest exhale. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to react, but the moment pulled it out of me. Her toes relaxed. She didn't speak. Instead, she let the quiet stretch a little longer, and in that lingering pause, something passed between us. Not words, not permission, but awareness. I could have let go, could have set her foot gently back on the couch, drawn the line again, reinforced the walls. But I didn't, because in that exact second, I realized I didn't want the moment to end. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She didn't move her foot. and I didn't release it. We stayed there, suspended in the middle of something unnamed. The room had fallen into that hushed kind of silence, the kind that makes you think the air itself is listening. I could feel her gaze on me now, steady and quiet. Not probing, not teasing, just watching. I didn't look up right away. I couldn't. My eyes were still on her foot, on the soft curve of her toes, now resting gently across my fingers. They weren't doing anything, just being. But the stillness felt louder than anything else in the room. I shifted slightly in my seat, as if that might somehow ease the intensity, but it didn't. Her heel pressed slightly firmer against my thigh. A subtle shift, as if in response. As if to say, don't run. So I didn't. When I finally looked up, her eyes were waiting for me. Wide, open, steady. No esmirk, no amusement. Just that quiet, curious calm I'd come to know so well. Except now, it was layered with something more. Something deeper. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. I like how careful you are, she said softly. The words landed like a pebble in water, small, but the ripples were everywhere. I swallowed. I just didn't want to. Hurt me, she interrupted, her voice warm. You won't. That stopped me. She leaned forward then, slow and fluid, and placed her other foot fully in my lap beside the first. The message was clear. I looked down at her, at the quiet confidence of her body, the way she trusted me with her weight, her touch, her presence. And I knew what that meant. She wasn't just letting me hold her feet. She was letting me see her. And somehow, without saying it, she was seeing me too. The moment after she placed both feet in my lap felt endless. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. She didn't speak. Neither did I. We just sat there, surrounded by a quiet so thick it felt like the house itself was holding its breath with us. The rain had slowed to a lazy patter, like it knew it needed to stay gentle now. Her feet rested comfortably across my thighs. Not tense, not testing, just settled. I didn't move my hands. I was afraid to. Afraid that even the smallest shift might break whatever delicate trust had formed between us in the hush. But I didn't have to move, because she did. One of her toes, slowly, deliberately, traced the line of my forearm. It wasn't overt. It wasn't playful. It was something else entirely. A question maybe. A whisper. A feeling given form. My breath caught before I could stop it. Her toe lingered there, light against my skin, then moved again, tracing back, softer this time. She didn't look at me. Just leaned her head back against the couch, her eyes half-lidded like none of this was new to her. But for me, it was everything. The softness of her skin, the gentle way she moved, the awareness in every tiny shift. It made the silence between us feel charged. Sacred. I didn't know what this was becoming. I didn't know if she knew either. But I felt it. In my skin. In my chest. In the air around us. And that simple, breathless silence was louder than anything I'd ever known. It was an accident. At least, that's what I told myself. Her foot shifted slightly in my lap. Not much, just enough to reposition. Her ankle rolled, her toes extended, and one of them brushed my lips. Barely. A soft, passing graze. A line of contact so light it could have been imagined. But it wasn't. My breath stalled. I didn't flinch, didn't recoil. I just froze. Completely, absolutely still. Like my body knew the moment was too fragile to disturb. Her toe hovered there for a second longer than it should have. Then it pulled back, slowly, gracefully, as if it had never touched me at all. I looked up. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't looking away, either. Her eyes were on mine. Steady. A little darker than before. No epalegi. No explanation. Just waiting. And in that pause, in that single, suspended breath between her movement and mine, something cracked open inside me. Not panic. Not guilt. Just awareness. Awareness of how her foot had felt against my mouth. Of the faint scent of skin and lavender lotion still in the air. Of the unbearable gentleness of it all. It hadn't been a kiss. Not exactly. But it had felt more intimate than one. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. The moment passed. Not erased. Just folded into the silence between us. Like a bookmark pressed into a page we both knew we'd return to. She shifted again, subtly, but her toes stayed near, close enough that I could feel the warmth of them, close enough that, if I leaned forward just slightly— No, I didn't. Not yet. But the space between that brush and the next felt impossibly small and impossibly electric. I didn't move. I couldn't. Her toe had barely grazed my lips, but the echo of that touch still burned there, a ghost imprint, tender and warm. My whole body had gone quiet, like it was afraid to break the spell. Muscles tense, but unmoving, breath shallow, mind racing with thoughts I didn't know how to finish. And still, her feet rested in my lap. Still, the moment hung between us like smoke that refused to clear. She didn't apologize. She didn't shift away. If anything, her body had settled even more comfortably into the couch, as if that brush had been inevitable, not accidental. As if we were both right where we were supposed to be. The warmth of her skin against mine was no longer just presence. It was pressure. Soft, steady, undeniable. I stared down at her foot, still so close to my face, the curve of her arch gently tilted, the polish on her toes catching the gold of the dim light. Every detail burned itself into me, and I was paralyzed, not from fear, not from shame, but for something else, something quieter, something that made my chest tighten with need and confusion all at once. I could still taste the moment. Not her, the moment. She didn't speak, but I felt her eyes on me. I could sense her watching, reading my stillness, maybe waiting to see what I'd do next. But I didn't do anything, not because I didn't want to, but because I was terrified that moving might take it all away. The tension, the trust, the closeness, that fragile, breathless current humming between us. So I stayed still, completely, utterly still, letting her foot rest there, letting that accidental kiss linger in the quiet, and wondering how long a man could stay frozen in a moment before it changed him forever. I felt her before I saw her move. The faintest shift in her weight, a slow, fluid adjustment of her legs. One foot slid just a little farther up my thigh, the arch pressing into the denim, anchoring her there. And then I looked up. Our eyes met and stayed. Everything else vanished. The rain outside, the hum of the fridge, even the low light flickering on the ceiling. All of it faded in a background haze as her gaze met mine and didn't look away. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't teasing. Her eyes held something deeper. Not desire exactly. Not in the way I expected. Something more dangerous. More patient. Like she was letting me see her, all of her, and waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. Her toes flexed slowly. She felt it too. The pull, the pulse in the silence. Her breath was calm, but I noticed the way her chest rose just a little quicker now. We stared at each other like that for what could have been seconds or minutes. Time didn't work right anymore. My hand was still around her foot. I could feel the warmth of her skin, the way her heel rested against my thigh. She could have pulled away at any moment. She didn't, and neither did I, because in that quiet, breath-held stare, something shifted, not outside us, but between us. Whatever this was, it wasn't casual anymore. Not a joke, not a game, not even a line crossed. It was a realization, a confession without words. And still we didn't speak, because words couldn't carry what passed between our eyes. They would have only lessened it. So we just stared, not in fear, not in shame, but in mutual, trembling clarity. She saw me. I saw her. And we both knew. Something had changed. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. That look, that long, quiet lock between our eyes, said everything. More than words ever could have. I felt something loosen inside me. A kind of surrender. Not to her exactly, but to the truth that had been building between us for weeks, maybe longer. The rain outside softened into a hush, like it knew its part was done. The house around us stayed still. No interruptions. No distractions. Just her. Just me. And this new space between us that wasn't really between us at all. She broke eye contact first, but not to pull away. She shifted, slowly drawing one leg up until her knee rested on the couch, and her foot slid higher along my thigh. Not testing, not tempting, just resting, claiming. Her heel pressed gently into my hip, her toes angled just beside my ribs, the arch of her foot brushing faintly along the edge of my shirt. I felt every point of contact like a pulse. She tilted her head slightly, studying me like someone choosing not to speak, not because they couldn't, but because silence said more. My breath slowed. I matched her stillness. I didn't break it. There was no shame in the room, only honesty. Whatever we were becoming, whatever this was, it wasn't confusion anymore. It was quiet, mutual recognition, that this closeness was real, that had depth, that it mattered. Her toes moved just slightly, a soft, deliberate curl into my side. And I didn't flinch. I didn't freeze. I simply let her stay, let myself feel it. And in that silence, we both agreed on something unspoken. We were past the point of wondering, past the fear of wrong. This wasn't about right or wrong. It was about truth and trust. And the way she looked at me like I was finally letting her in. She reached behind her, pulling the throw pillow from the side of the couch and sliding it beside her hip. Then with one slow, fluid movement, she shifted. Her body leaned slightly toward me, her arm draping over the back of the couch, and her legs adjusted with her. Both feet now pressed softly into my lap, the weight of her resting there like it belonged. And then one of her feet lifted, not fast, not teasing, just deliberate. She placed it gently on the pillow, the one now beside me, near my chest, near my face. I didn't breathe for a moment. The pillow shifted slightly under the weight of her foot, and the curve of her arch settled right in front of me, elegant and effortless. Her toes pointed just slightly inward, flexing once as if to test the space. I could smell her now, faint lotion, warm skin, the kind of scent that only comes from closeness. She didn't look at me as she did it. Her eyes were on the window, watching the mist roll across the glass. But everything about her posture told me she was aware of where her foot was, where I was, and that I hadn't pulled away. The pillow between us no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like an offering. I glanced at her foot, at the way her toes wiggled slightly, casually. The polish had begun to fade, just at the tips. I imagined the softness of her sole, the delicate curve of her heel, the warmth that radiated into the cushion. And she just left it there, so close, so still. Her trust was louder than any invitation. I could feel my breath moving slow and careful in my chest, like any sudden shift might scatter the moment. And somehow I knew, if I leaned in just slightly, she wouldn't stop me. Because this simple shift wasn't an accident. She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to see the side of her face, the curve of her cheek, the softness in her jaw. And then I saw it. The smile. Barely there. Faint, but real. Like she was holding something warm in her mouth and didn't want to let it spill. Her foot stayed on the pillow, resting near my chest like it had every right to be there. The toes were relaxed now. No flexing, no movement, just present. Steady. She still didn't speak. But she didn't have to. That smile was more than enough. I don't think I'd ever seen someone look so confident and calm at the same time. So in control without needing to say a word. She wasn't trying to provoke me. She wasn't playing a game. She was offering something unspoken, and she knew I understood. My hand stayed in my lap, though every part of me wanted to reach out. Just a touch. Just a hold. Just to know if the warmth I felt from her foot on the pillow was as strong as it seemed. Her eyes flicked toward me, only for a second, and then away again. But it was enough to see what shimmered behind them. Not mischief, not flirtation. Trust. Complete, unguarded trust. That was the power of her smile. It didn't invite. It confirmed. Confirmed that the moment we were in wasn't imagined. That I wasn't crazy. That she felt it too. She shifted her foot just slightly, the sole brushing softly against the fabric of the pillow. Her heel pressed down, her toes lifting as if they were reaching for something unspoken. And still, she smiled. A quiet, knowing smile. The kind that says, I've been waiting for you to see this. And now that you do, you don't have to be afraid. The silence between us stretched, thick, heavy, and full of everything left unsaid. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for one of us to break the spell. But neither of us did. Instead, the moment became a confession without words. I realized then how long I'd been carrying this inside me. The secret pull, the quiet longing I hadn't dared to name. She was the only one who ever saw it. Or maybe the only one I ever let see. Her painted toes still rested softly against the pillow, just inches from my face. I felt the warmth of her skin through the fabric, and it was like a silent promise. A promise that whatever this was, whatever we were becoming, it was safe here, that I didn't have to hide it anymore. I wanted to tell her everything, to spill out the months of thoughts and feelings I'd kept locked away. But the words tangled in my throat, so I just held her foot a little tighter, careful not to squeeze. She looked at me then, her eyes wide and open, searching, and in that look, I found something I hadn't expected: understanding. Not judgment, not confusion, just quiet acceptance. It was the kind of acceptance that breaks down walls without a single word. I wanted to believe we were finally past the point of pretending, that the truth of what we felt could live here, in the softness of her touch, in the warmth of her bare skin, in the steady pulse of her presence. That we could be honest, and maybe even free. Her foot moved again, this time slower, more deliberate. The heel pressed lightly against my collarbone, tracing the line beneath my neck as if mapping the fragile terrain of my skin. I didn't breathe at first. I just felt the warmth, the softness, the unexpected weight of something intimate pressing gently against me. Her toes followed, trailing down my chest, barely grazing the fabric of my shirt. The contact was subtle, almost shy, but it carried the unmistakable weight of intention. I closed my eyes, letting myself sink into the sensation. The world around us faded into a muted hum, leaving only the quiet rhythm of her movements and the steady beat of my own heart. When I opened them again, she was watching me, eyes bright, unflinching, and full of something I couldn't name but recognized all the same. A mix of patience and desire. Her foot lingered there longer than before, and I felt a flutter deep inside me, a tender, aching need that I couldn't ignore. I wanted to reach out, to touch her in return, but the hesitation held me back. So I stayed still, letting her take the lead, surrendering to the silent conversation playing out between skin and soul. She shifted once more, the toes curling softly against my skin, and in that tiny movement, the tension between us broke just a little, becoming something softer, something more real. The kind of touch that speaks louder than words. Her foot returned to my face, this time slower, more intentional. The arch traced lightly along my cheek, sending shivers beneath my skin. I couldn't stop staring at the curve of her arch, the gentle flex of her toes. Each movement was deliberate yet effortless, like a secret language only we understood. Her painted toes brushed softly against my lips, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a whisper of a touch, intimate but unspoken, a silent confession wrapped in warmth and vulnerability. She held her gaze steady as I swallowed the rising tension, feeling the quiet power in that delicate connection. The room seemed to hold its breath with us, every moment stretched into eternity. I felt exposed, yet safe, as though the simple brush of her toes was a promise that nothing would break this fragile trust. Her other foot rested gently against my side, grounding us both in the present. I wanted to speak, to break the silence, but the words refused to come. Instead, I leaned in slightly, letting the space between us shrink just enough to feel the warmth of her skin without crossing any line. The tension was electric, charged with the weight of unspoken desire and hesitant hope. She smiled softly, and for the first time, I felt that maybe this moment wasn't just fleeting. Maybe it was the beginning. I let the tension settle. Her foot lingered softly against my face, and instead of pulling away, I leaned into the sensation, accepting the quiet intimacy we shared. The hesitation that had gripped me loosened, replaced by a calm awareness that this connection wasn't a mistake or a fleeting impulse. It was real. Her painted toes were no longer just part of her. They were part of us. Part of this fragile dance we had begun. I closed my eyes briefly, savoring the softness, the warmth, the trust. When I opened them, she was watching me, her eyes gentle but steady, a silent affirmation that we were both ready for this new truth. No words were needed. We had crossed an invisible line, one neither of us could forget. But instead of fear or guilt, there was peace. A shared acceptance that whatever this was, it was ours to explore quietly and carefully, without judgment or rush. Her foot slipped slowly away, but the space it left behind felt fuller, charged with possibility. And as the room settled back into stillness, I realized I was ready. Ready to let go of the past. Ready to embrace this strange, beautiful connection. Ready to accept whatever came next. The room felt smaller somehow, the distance between us shrinking with every heartbeat. Her foot had just slipped away from my face, but the warmth lingered, a quiet invitation I couldn't ignore. I hesitated, breath shallow, hands trembling just a little as I reached out. Not for her hand, not yet, for her foot. Slowly, reverently, I lifted it back toward me, tracing the curve of her arch with my fingertips, feeling the softness beneath my skin. Her toes flexed lightly, welcoming the touch. Then, almost without thinking, I leaned in, closer, slower, until my lips brushed the top of her foot. Not a kiss. Not quite. More like a promise. A whisper of connection spoken without words. Her eyes found mine, wide and steady, reflecting the unspoken understanding between us. There was no rush, no urgency, just the quiet warmth of two people crossing a threshold together. I rested my lips briefly, savoring the softness, the subtle scent of lotion, the delicate pulse beneath my mouth. When I pulled back, she smiled, a smile that said everything I couldn't put into words. This was more than desire, more than attraction. It was trust, a shared secret, and the beginning of something real. The rain had finally stopped. Outside, the world was washed clean, leaves glistening, streets shimmering with reflected light. Inside, the quiet was different now. Softer, fuller. She rested her head against my lap, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. Her bare feet still nestled near me. The gentle warmth a constant reminder of everything that had shifted between us. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The storm outside had passed, but something deeper had settled inside. A calm born for vulnerability, trust, and a connection that defied easy explanation. I traced my fingers lightly along her foot, careful not to break the fragile piece. This moment was ours, unspoken, untouchable by the noise of the world beyond these walls. I felt the weight of everything we'd crossed, the silences, the touches, the stolen glances. And I knew, without a doubt, that whatever came next, we had already begun a journey together. The kind of journey that doesn't follow maps or rules. Only the quiet pull of two souls finally coming home. As the light shifted through the window, bathing us in soft gold, I closed my eyes and let myself simply be here now with her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole.